Today I want to talk to you about the advantage of having your own business vis-a-vis being employed or versus being employed.
It is the ActionCOACH Africa podcast hosted by Pieter Scholtz. Don't forget to subscribe for more.
A couple of points here. The first thing is for us to understand, why do people not want to go into business for themselves? Why do they prefer to stay in employment? The second thing is for us to then look at is, what are the risk versus reward issues that we need to unpack? The third issue is the issue around control of your destiny. Fourth matter being the level of personal growth that you will go through in running your own particular business. And then lastly is around something that I just referred to as flexibility. Now let's get back to point number one. Why do most people not get into business for themselves? And when I've asked this question of people on many occasions before, the first thing that comes back to me is that they prefer the security that having a job provides them. So what I want us to quickly understand is that the only level of security you've got in employment is equal to the notice period that you've got in your job. If your job gives you a 30-day contract, that's as much job security you have being employed. In your own business, given the fact that your own business, your security is directly related to the input and effort you put into running this business. That's where your security comes from. The second point that I want to unpack here quickly today is the concept of risk versus reward. The majority of people don't get into business for themselves because they are worried about that time period from the day that they leave their corporate jobs to the day that they can start earning the exact amount of money that they were in corporate. I call it that underwater phase. And so the majority of people look at that phrase or that time of running their own businesses and they worry about being underwater or the cash flow drain on their resources. Yet we do not look enough at what is the end result of all the effort that I put in. The effort that I put into running my own business is directly commensurate to the amount of money and the reward I'm going to get out of that. And in my experience, 90% of people end up in a position where they're far better off running their own businesses financially than they might have been had they been employed in corporate going forward. So let's get back to the third point around what I refer to as just control. One of the best advantages for me around running my own business is that I'm in control of the destiny of the organization that I lead and I run. Therefore, I can make the decisions about where we're going to play, which markets we're going to tap, which products we're going to offer, what pricing we're going to offer to the particular client base, and how fast or quickly we're going to particularly grow this particular business. Whereas when you're in employment, you're running against the decisions and decisions that your leaders are making for you. And so there, to me, is a very clear distinction between the two. I then want to come back to the fourth point around personal growth. The biggest advantage in running your own business is that I call it the 6 hats theory. You're carrying 6 hats at any particular given point in time in your business. You're the salesperson, you're the marketing person, you're the finance person, you're the HR person, you're the operations person, and then you're just dealing with all the stuff in the business. And so the level of growth that you and I are going to go through when we run our own businesses is a really steep curve. And I would suggest the following to you, that if you are not open to going through that level of growth in your own business, then entrepreneurship or business ownership for you is not for you. Every single business owner that gets into business ownership for themselves has got to make themselves available to experience that level of growth fundamentally going forward. And then lastly, I want to get to the point around flexibility. It's a personal story for me, but when I talk about flexibility, I talk about the ability to do certain things at the time that I want to do. Entrepreneurship, business ownership requires hard work. Let's not be mistaken by that. It requires a huge amount of hard work, sometimes early in the morning till late at night. But the biggest advantage for me in terms of running your own business is the flexibility it gives you to decide when to work. If, for instance, you chose to go traveling overseas, if, for instance, you needed to go and watch your kids play sport, if, for instance, you chose to go and pursue hobbies or your passions or whatever ministry you have that you want to go and do during working hours, you can do that. But it just means you either have to have a team behind you that is carrying on running the business, or you have to come back and play that up later on. But the flexibility of doing it and managing my own time is, for me, one of the biggest advantages of running your own business vis-a-vis being employed. So I trust that if we unpack these particular points around understanding the advantages, disadvantages of running your own businesses vis-a-vis being employed, it's critical for us to understand these points. I want to add a last point into this, and it comes back to an understanding of the financial rewards you get into running your own business. And there are two components that we have to look at here. Number one is an understanding that when I build a business, there are two forms of business, two very broad forms of business that we can unpack. One is a capital-based business, that as you start the business and you develop the business and you grow it, you can sell it after 3 or 4 or 5 years with very, very clear exit strategy at multiple times the value that you then when you started the business. So it's a very strong capital-based business. An example of that is a manufacturing business or business that has got assets that you can sell off. The other core component of understanding which type of business you're running is to understand that I have a cash flow-based business. In other words, like most professional business-to-business businesses, your ability to sell that business at huge capital gain after a given period of time is not normally there. But for me to understand whether my business is a capital-based business or a cash flow-based business, and to understand the distinctions between the two, is absolutely critical. In the cash flow-based business, it allows me to take cash out legally, be it quarterly, 6 monthly, annually, through dividend declarations or whatever, and invest in assets outside the business. Because we've got to recognize that the reason why I'm in business is to build my personal wealth, to build my net asset value, whether I build that in the form of a capital-based business, or whether I build that in the form of building assets that generate passive income for me equal to the market-related salary I'm paying myself out of the business, is a very clear understanding that we need to unpack. So just to summarize that last point, critical for me. Understand that I'm here to build a business that generates an increase in my net asset value. Now, that net asset value could either come from the business because it's a capital-based business, or it could come from a cash flow business where I take cash out of the business and invest into property, shares, and in other businesses that generate passive income for me to work from and replace the income that I'm currently getting from the business. Absolutely critical for us to understand that. Your ability to do that in corporate is not as good at all as opposed to running that in your own business. Thank you for joining me today. I trust you found this episode of value. If you are a business owner or you're a leader of an executive team and you want to work with me in helping you build a generational business, then I would encourage you to go to my website at actioncoach.africa. And if you enjoyed this, subscribe and I'll see you next time.